Let me tell you something that is going to bother you. Every time you close a trade early and the market keeps running without you, you tell yourself you were being smart. You tell yourself you were protecting your capital. You tell yourself that locking in profit is what a responsible trader does. But here is the truth. You were not being responsible. You were being afraid. And that fear, dressed up as caution, is costing you more money than your losing trades ever will. I, Mark Douglas, have watched thousands of traders sit in front of their screens, watch a perfectly good trade move in their favor, and then kill it. Not because the trade was wrong, not because the setup invalidated, but because the feeling of having unrealized profit created so much anxiety that they could not stand it for one more second. They grabbed whatever the market would give them and ran. And then they watched the trade go exactly where they planned it to go without them on it. If that sounds familiar, stay right here. Because today I am going to give you 5 rules that will fundamentally change how you manage your trades. These are not tips, these are not suggestions. These are non-negotiable commitments. And if you follow them, you will stop bleeding money through the one mistake that separates struggling traders from professionals, the inability to let a winning trade do its job. There is a tool I will mention briefly, the Speculator's Journal at thespeculatorsjournal.com, that gives you a way to actually see the emotional patterns behind your early exits, something that willpower alone has never been able to do. The link is in the description. But first, let me show you why you keep doing this to yourself. Here is what your trading looks like right now. You take a trade, your analysis is sound, your entry is clean, the market starts moving in your direction, and for a moment you feel good. But then something shifts. You start watching the profit and loss number on your screen. You see it go from $50 to $70 to $100. And instead of feeling confident, you feel a knot in your stomach. You start thinking, what if it comes back? What if I give this back? What if I should just take what I have? And so you close the trade, you take your $100, and the market moves another $300 in your direction. You tell yourself it is fine. Profit is profit. But then you do it again, and again, and again. You move your target closer. You close at the first sign of a pullback. You scale out a position so aggressively that by the time the trade reaches your original target, you have almost nothing left on. And your winners end up the same size as your losers, or worse, smaller. How many times have you had a day where you were right about the direction, right about the entry, right about the setup, and still barely broke even? How many times have you looked at your journal and realized that if you had simply held your trades to their original targets, you would have had a completely different month? Mark Douglas spent decades studying exactly this pattern. He observed that the root of premature exits was not a flaw in the trader's analysis. It was a flaw in the trader's relationship with uncertainty. You cannot tolerate the discomfort of not knowing whether this particular trade will work, so you eliminate the uncertainty by closing it. You convert an open, uncertain position into a closed, certain one. And the relief you feel in that moment is so powerful that your brain learns to repeat the behavior. You are not managing risk, you are managing your anxiety. And those are two completely different things. Now, I know what you are thinking. You are thinking, but sometimes the market does reverse. Sometimes taking profit early is the right move. And you are correct. Sometimes it is. But here is the question you need to ask yourself honestly. Are you closing trades early because your system told you to, or because your emotions told you to? Because if you do not have a predefined mechanical reason for exiting, then it was not a decision. It was a reaction. And reactions do not build consistency. Here is the lie you have been told. You have been told that good traders are the ones who know when to take profit, that the skill is in reading the market in real time and making dynamic adjustments. But the truth is the opposite. The best traders in the world are the ones who make the fewest decisions while a trade is live. They do their thinking before they enter. They define everything, entry, stop, target, and then they execute the plan. The trade itself is boring. It is supposed to be boring. If you are making decisions while a trade is open, you are not trading. You are gambling with extra steps. Mark Douglas built an entire philosophy around this idea that your results as a trader are not determined by your ability to predict the market. They are determined by your ability to execute a plan without interference from your own psychology. The market does not care about your feelings. It does not care about your P&L. It does not care whether this particular trade works or not. And the moment you can internalize that, the moment you can truly accept that any single trade is irrelevant to your long-term results, you will stop strangling your winners. Because the urge to close early comes from treating each trade as if it matters more than it does. So let me give you the 5 rules. And I mean rules, not guidelines. If you treat these as optional, they will not work. They work precisely because they are rigid. Let me talk about the first rule. Define your exit before you enter. This is non-negotiable. Before you place a trade, you must know exactly where your target is. Not roughly, not a zone, an exact price. And you must write it down. Here is why this matters. When you enter a trade without a predefined exit, you are handing the decision over to your emotional brain. And your emotional brain does not care about your trading plan. It cares about survival. It cares about avoiding pain. An unrealized profit that might disappear feels like a threat. So it will scream at you to close the trade, and it will scream louder the more profit you have, because now there is more to lose. I know what you are thinking. You are thinking that rigid targets are too inflexible, that the market is dynamic and you should be too. But think about this. A surgeon does not walk into an operating room and decide what to do based on how they feel in the moment. They have a plan. They know what they are going to do before they make the first incision. Flexibility is not a virtue when you are under pressure. Under pressure, flexibility becomes chaos. Here is exactly what this looks like. You sit down before the market opens, you identify your setup, you determine your entry price, you determine your stop loss price, and you determine your target price. Then you write all 3 numbers down, not in your head, on paper, or in your journal. Something you can see. When the trade triggers, you enter your stop and your target into your platform, and then the decision is made. There is nothing left to decide. You plan the surgery, now you execute it. This connects back to the core principle. You are not closing trades early because you lack skill. You are closing them early because you are making decisions under emotional duress. Remove the decision, and you remove the problem. But defining your exit is only the beginning, because even with a target set, you will be tempted to override it. Which brings me to the second rule. Let me talk about the second rule. Never modify a target while in a trade unless your system explicitly tells you to. This is non-negotiable. Once your target is set and the trade is live, you do not move it. Not closer, not further. You leave it alone. Here is the psychology behind this. Your brain is wired to seek certainty. When you are in a profitable trade, your brain starts negotiating with you. It says, you have made enough. It says, just move the target a little closer. It says, what is the harm in taking 90% of the move? And the answer is that the harm is catastrophic, not on any single trade, but across hundreds of trades. Because 90% of your target, repeated over 100 trades, compounds into a massively different equity curve than 100% of your target. I know what you are thinking. You are thinking, what if the market gives clear signs of reversing? And here is my answer. If your trading system has a specific, predefined condition for adjusting a target, a condition you wrote down before the trade, not one you invented in the moment, then you follow that condition. But if you are moving your target because you feel like the market might reverse, that is not a system adjustment. That is fear, and you need to recognize the difference. Let me give you a worked example. You enter a long trade on a stock at $50. Your stop is at $49. Your target is at $53. The stock moves to $51.50. You are up $1.50 per share. Your brain says, this is good, take it. But your target is 53, so you do nothing. The stock pulls back to 51. Your brain screams, you still do nothing. The stock moves to 52, then 52.50, then 53. Your target fills. You made $3 per share instead of $1.50. You doubled your profit by doing absolutely nothing. That is the skill. Doing nothing is the hardest thing in trading, and it is the most profitable. Now, even with a fixed target and the discipline to leave it alone, there is still the problem of what you do while the trade is running, which brings me to the third rule. Let me talk about the third rule. Control your exposure to the trade. This is non-negotiable. Once your trade is live, with your stop and target in place, you must limit how often you look at it. Here is why. Every time you look at your unrealized profit or loss, you trigger an emotional response. If the trade is up, you feel the urge to close it. If the trade is down, you feel the urge to widen your stop or add to the position. Every glance at the screen is an invitation for your emotions to hijack your plan. So the solution is simple. Stop looking. I know what you are thinking. You are thinking that is irresponsible. You are thinking that you need to monitor your positions. But let me ask you this. You set your stop loss, correct? That is your risk management. It is already in place. You set your target. That is your exit. It is already in place. So what exactly are you monitoring? You are not monitoring risk. You are monitoring your feelings. And that is not trading. That is self-torture. Here is how this works in practice. You enter your trade. You confirm your stop and target are set on your platform. Then you set a timer for 1 hour, or 2 hours, or whatever interval makes sense for your time frame. You close your trading platform. You walk away from the screen, you do something else. When the timer goes off, you check back in. If the trade is still running, you set another timer and walk away again. You do not sit there watching every tick. You do not hover over the close button. You plant the seed and you leave it alone. You do not dig it up every 5 minutes to see if it has grown. This is where most traders fail. They confuse activity with productivity. They think that watching the screen is working. It is not. The work was done before the trade was placed. Everything after that is just noise. And here is the bridge to the next rule. Controlling your exposure to the trade only works if you trust your system. And trusting your system requires something most traders never do. Let me talk about the fourth rule. Track your emotional state, not just your results. This is non-negotiable. After every single trade, you must document what you felt before, during, and after the trade, not your P&L, not the setup, your emotional state. Here is the psychology. You cannot change a pattern you cannot see. Most traders journal their trades by recording entries, exits, and results. That is accounting. It tells you nothing about why you did what you did. The reason you close trades early is not recorded in your P&L. It is recorded in the feeling you had at the moment you reach for the close button. Until you start tracking that feeling, naming it, and recognizing it, you will repeat the same behavior forever. I know what you are thinking. You are thinking that emotions are vague and hard to track, but they are not if you ask the right questions. Here is exactly what you write after every trade. Question 1. What was I feeling when I entered this trade? Question 2. At what point during the trade did I feel the urge to deviate from my plan? Question 3. Did I deviate? If yes, what was the feeling that drove it? Question 4. If I held to my plan, what did that feel like? Question 5. What would I do differently next time? Let me walk you through this. You take a trade. Your entry is clean. The market moves in your favor. At the halfway point to your target, you feel a strong urge to close. You feel it in your chest. Your breathing gets shallow. You want to lock in the gain. But this time, you do not close. You hold. The trade hits your target. Afterward, you sit down and write. You write, I felt anxiety at the halfway point. My breathing changed. I wanted to close, but I held. After the target hit, I felt relief and pride. That entry in your journal is worth more than 100 P&L entries, because now you can see the pattern. Now you can see that anxiety always shows up at the halfway point. Now you have something to work with. This is what Mark Douglas was pointing toward when he taught that a trader's results flow from their beliefs and emotional patterns, not from their charts. He understood that the real edge is self-awareness, seeing the internal forces that drive your behavior in the moment. The problem is that in his time, there was no practical tool to give traders this kind of structured visibility into their own psychology. It was all willpower and honest self-reflection, and most traders did not have enough of either. The Speculator's Journal at thespeculatorsjournal.com was built to close that gap, to give you a way to actually see your emotional patterns and recurring mistakes laid out in front of you, not through raw discipline alone, but through structured self-observation that becomes second nature. The link is in the description if you want to look into it. But the principle underneath remains the same. You cannot fix what you cannot see. Now, tracking your emotional state shows you the pattern, but breaking the pattern requires something deeper. Which brings me to the fifth and most important rule. Let me talk about the fifth rule. Think in sets, not in singles. This is non-negotiable. You must stop evaluating your trading on a trade-by-trade basis and start evaluating it in sets of 20 or more. Here is why this is the most important rule of all. The reason you close trades early, the reason you feel anxiety, the reason you cannot let a winner run all of it, comes from one fundamental error. You believe that this trade matters. You believe that the outcome of this specific trade is significant. And because you believe it is significant, you feel the emotional weight of it. You feel the pressure to make it work. You feel the fear of losing what you have gained. But here's the reality. If your system has a genuine edge, then any individual trade is statistically meaningless. It is one data point in a distribution. It is one flip of a weighted coin. You would never judge a coin after one flip. You would never say this coin is broken because it landed tails. You would flip it 100 times and look at the distribution. Trading is no different. Your edge shows up over many trades, not on any single one. I know what you are thinking. You are thinking, I understand probability, but it does not feel that way when real money is on the line. And you are right, it does not feel that way. Because your brain did not evolve to think in probabilities. Your brain evolved to avoid immediate threats. And an open trade with unrealized profit that might disappear feels like an immediate threat. So your survival instinct kicks in, close the trade, eliminate the threat, feel safe. But safety is not the goal. Consistency is the goal. And consistency requires you to override your survival instinct on every single trade, every single day. That is not willpower. That is identity. You must become the kind of person who genuinely does not care about the outcome of this trade because you know not hope, not believe, but know that your edge will play out over the next 100 trades. Here is how you practice this. At the end of every week, do not look at your total P&L first. Look at your execution score. Out of every trade you took this week, how many did you hold to your original target? If you took 10 trades and held 8 of them to target, your execution score is 80%. That is the number that matters. Not your profit, not your win rate, your execution score. Because if your system has an edge and you execute it flawlessly, the money is a mathematical inevitability. You do not need to chase it. You do not need to grab it. It comes to you. And here is how you know you are doing this right. Flip the question. Instead of asking, how much money did I make this week? Ask, how many times did I follow my plan this week? If the answer is every single time, then it was a perfect week, even if you lost money. Because you cannot control the outcome. You can only control the execution. And execution, repeated consistently, is what produces results. Let me bring this all together. You are not closing trades early because you are bad at trading. You are closing trades early because you are human. Your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Protect you from uncertainty, avoid potential loss, seek immediate safety. The problem is that the behavior that keeps you alive in the wild is the same behavior that destroys you in the markets. So here are your 5 commitments. 1, you define your exit before you enter, every single trade, every single day. 2, you never modify your target while a trade is live unless your written system tells you to. 3, you control your exposure to the trade by walking away from the screen once your stops and targets are set. 4, you track your emotional state after every trade, not just your results. 5, you think in sets of 20 or more trades and measure your execution score, not your P&L. Do these 5 things for the next 6 months. Not some of them, all of them, every day, without exception. And I promise you, something will change. It will not be dramatic. It will not be exciting. You will not have a breakthrough moment where everything clicks. What will happen is quieter than that. You will notice that you feel less. You will notice that the anxiety at the halfway point is still there, but it is softer. You will notice that you can sit with an open trade and breathe normally. You will notice that your winners are getting bigger, not because you are picking better trades, but because you are finally letting them finish. That is what mastery looks like. It does not look like excitement. It does not look like big wins. It looks like boredom. It looks like doing the same thing the same way every single day and feeling almost nothing about it. Remember what I told you at the beginning. Closing trades early feels like discipline. It feels like you are being smart. But it is fear. And the only way to overcome fear in the markets is not to fight it, but to build a structure so rigid that fear has no room to operate. That is what these 5 rules give you. Not courage. Structure. Mark Douglas dedicated his life to teaching traders that the battle is never with the market. The battle is always with yourself. And the traders who win that battle are not the ones with the best strategies. They are the ones who built the systems and the self-awareness to execute without interference from their own psychology. That is the standard. That is what you are building toward. And you do not need to get smarter. You do not need a better indicator. You need to get more boring. You need to get so boring that the market cannot touch you emotionally. Start today. Define your exits. Hold your targets. Walk away from the screen. Track what you feel. Think in sets. Do this. And you will become a different trader, not because you learned something new, but because you finally stopped getting in your own way.